Hello, my lovely little gemstones, it's Saphira, and welcome back to Fluffuary, a month-long event dedicated to Sanderside ships of all kinds. This is Day 19, Remile. The title is Rising with the Sun, and the summary, Emile meets all sorts of people at the cafe he owns, but there's one customer who comes every day that he's more interested in than most. Emile was a morning person. He loved waking up before the sun, starting his day as its gentle rays slowly filled the sky. It was calm in the early morning. There were no expectations. It was just him and the quiet world outside his apartment. 3 years ago, he had opened up a cafe that was open from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and it was his pride and joy. He met all kinds of people at his job, but they were mostly morning people just like him. There were a few who weren't, always grumbling and complaining that their jobs had them up so early. Emile tried to sympathize with them, even though he couldn't understand where they were coming from. And then there was one customer who never really said anything. He'd started coming in every day at the same time, only 5 minutes after Emile unlocked the front door and flipped the open sign. Emile didn't know much about him. He didn't really make conversation, only mumbling agreement whenever Emile tried to encourage him by talking about the weather or something similarly mundane. It didn't come off as standoffish, though, more like he was sleepwalking. The only thing he did know for sure was his name, Remy. He suspected his early morning customer always came from the end of a third shift, meaning he had been awake and working all night. Emile couldn't blame him for being a little quiet. His sleepy smile was rather charming, and he had a habit of using pet names like Babe or Hun when he spoke. Emile found it cute. It didn't hurt that he was also incredibly attractive. He had gray eyes and fluffy hair that always had one little piece hanging out of place, with sunglasses perched on top of his head. He was fit, too. Probably a runner, if Emile had to guess. He pulled up to the shop a little before 5 a.m., letting himself in the back door and putting on his apron. He served a variety of pastries as well as coffee, and he prided himself on having fresh-baked items every single morning. An hour later, he was unlocking the front door, then going back behind the counter to start brewing Remy's coffee. To Emile's surprise, he only took his coffee black, with a little sugar and cream. If he had to guess his taste based on his appearance, Emile would have expected Remy to have an order that was much more complicated. He grabbed a cup from the stack as the coffee machine beeped, indicating it was ready. He took the marker from his apron and popped the cap, scribbling on the cup before pouring the coffee inside. Emile smiled to himself as he put the cap on, setting the coffee on the counter. 5 minutes after 6, right on time, the little bell above the door chimed and Remy walked in, shifting the sunglasses to his hair. "Good morning, Remy," Emile called as he stood up from stocking the pastry display. Remy smiled sleepily at him, saluting him as he tugged his card out of his pocket. "Morning, hon," he greeted, grabbing his coffee as Emile rang him up and taking a sip. "You're my savior. You know that?" "I try my best. It's a joy to see you every morning, too, you know." Remy took another sip of his coffee, raising an eyebrow. "I'm practically asleep every time I see you, babe. Are the rest of your customers really that bad?" Emile hummed. "No, it's just nice to know I get to see your face every day." The other didn't know how to respond to that, so instead he just shoved his card back into his pocket and ended up leaving the store. Emile wasn't too upset about it. He knew he'd be back soon, and hopefully Remy could get some sleep in the meantime. He really did look like he was about to fall over. The day went by quickly after that. He locked up at 2 p.m., setting to clean up and head home afterwards. He'd already boxed up the leftover baked goods to drop off at the local homeless shelter, and all he had to do was count the register and wipe up the tables in the dining room. He heard a knock on the glass door and he looked up instinctively, hoping it wasn't a customer who was going to demand he open the door and serve them. They came by quite often, and though he'd gotten better at dealing with them over the years, he still wasn't a fan of confrontational people. But instead, he saw a very familiar face standing there, and Emile's heart skipped a beat as he scurried to the door. "Remy!" he exclaimed, waving the other inside and locking the door behind him. "Sorry for showing up after you closed, but I had to talk to you about this." Remy held up his cup from earlier that morning. Instead of Remy's name being on it, Emile had jotted down his own name, as well as his phone number. Emile chewed his lip nervously. "Did I overstep? I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable with it. You can just ignore it if you're not interested." Remy laughed, shaking his head. "No, it's fine, babe. I just wanted to let you know that you've only ever seen me when I'm off from a 10-hour shift and craving caffeine. I'm so much more of a bitch in real life." That took Emile back for a moment, but he quickly recovered and smiled. "If you don't mind, I'd like to be the judge of that. Are you free around 6 tonight? I think that was supposed to be my line, sweetie." Emile grinned, throwing his washcloth back into his bucket of water and picking it up. "Well, I beat you to it. But how about this? You can text me all the details later of where we're eating and when. How about that?" Remy grinned, grabbing his sunglasses as he turned to the door to let himself out. "You've got yourself a date." Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the rest of this series. If you like my writing and you want to hear more, you can check out the other videos on my channel, or my AO3 link is in the description if you'd like to read them for yourself. See you next time!